Mic, camera, action.
Yo, action man. Can I buy you a beer?
Nah. Sorry, you mind?
So, where'd you work before then?
Orange, Delta, security. Europe.
Jolly exciting, was it, mate?
Yeah. Spectacular.
You ain't much for talking, are you, Mary Poppins?
Oh, no, I can talk. I just don't want to talk to you. Let me buy you a beer. Just make sure you drink it over there. Anything else?
Welcome back to Filmography, the show dedicated to watching every credited film from an actor's complete back catalogue, from past debut through to present day, in chronological order. Each episode, I'm joined by an esteemed guest to watch and discuss the next entry from the Faker's filmography and consider how it ranks amidst their career and whether we can trace any typecasting trends or topic traits or theatrical tics. For episode 41, I'm joined by the 20th Century Geek Scott Weatherly to discuss the 41st big screen appearance of the Stath in his anticipated reunion with Guy Ritchie, Wrath of Man. We watch, you listen, and hopefully watch along too. So, Scott, thank you very much. You're now returned to the show for your fourth appearance. And I think we'll talk about as we go. We've managed to hit most of his kind of one man on a mission movies, you and I together, which has become I don't think we did that on purpose. I think it's just a coincidence that we've been drawn to those to do together for some reason.
Yeah, I can't. They're the kind of films I like the one man army kind of movies are definitely my jam when it comes to those action films. And the Wrath of Stath, I think, is definitely it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's a good one. I actually enjoyed this. And I think the other things I'm interested to see, having gone through, as you say, with Blitz and War, and you're going through those different sort of approaches he's done. And I can feel him maturing in an interesting way as well. He finds his groove, and he just feels, especially War in particular, going back all the way back to War. He's definitely much more comfortable and sort of like this is not so much a different Stath, but like there's a if he clearly feels comfortable with Guy Ritchie and the way that this film's set up, but it's it doesn't have the over the top bombast of other sort of Statham films, and I kind of find I like that. So yeah, this is a good one. It's an interesting one.
I think assured is the perfect word you've picked there. This just has it has a confidence about it. Like his character does, his performance does, the movie does, Guy Ritchie's direction does. They just sort of have faith in the material and what they're doing. Because like Guy Ritchie's scaled right back as well. There's none of his showiness, as well as there's none of kind of the Stath's spectacular action scenes. It's like they I think that there's a trust in the story they're telling here that perhaps at other times that we've talked about how like they've changed it to match the Stath at times, and that hasn't quite
to make
worked.
It a Statham film.
Whereas it kind of hard avoids that here. There's no like Stath fighting at all. It's all gun action, isn't it? There's no martial arts. There's none of his like Hong Kong influence. If anything, it's leaning into that other thing we've spoken about quite a bit, which is the 60s and 70s kind of stoic heroes that he really likes and he looked up to, and the actors that he wanted to emulate. It leans much more into that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is more in the sort of vein of Blitz that we talked about, and the bank job and some of those as well. I think it feels in that vein. And because I have to sort of, when I first watched it through, and it did cross my mind having watched it. I think because I'm so used to Statham Kung Fu, Stath Fu, that by the end of this film, I was like, would it have mattered if it was anybody else? Could somebody else have played that role? And I was like, yeah, they should. I'm sure they could have done. But there's a kind of attitude that Jason Statham brings to this role, and again, that sort of one of the things about Jason Statham is like he has like a quiet confidence, in everything is mainly because he knows he can kick the crap out of everybody in the room. Like,
Yeah.
Doesn't need to sort of be showy and stuff. And I think that sort of, in this film, like he's playing a gangster. Like, he's made a gang leader, which will sort of, there's some points around that I want to bring up. But like, at no point is there anything about sort of like, there's no sort of pantomiming, shouting, and losing one's temper. Everything's just sort of quite even keeled. And there's a scene later on when they're looking for information about the gang and stuff. And he's got a bunch of people in there's a room or a hotel or whatever. And one of his men says, what do you want me to do? And he's like, I don't want you to do anything. And he just walks out and just like shoots 3 guys or 4 guys in a row. And like it's just sort of like, no skin off his nose. And you're like, yeah, of course. That's what Jason Statham brings to it. He's able to do that, but still have a level of charisma where you're like, yeah, you're clearly not like a bad dude, but I'm still on board with what you're doing. So, I'm along for the ride.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It's a very insular performance, but we spoke about that when he did it for Safe, and we could see that evolution of him being able to project confidence and other emotions too. There's the scene in Safe, isn't there, when he's on the train platform? We were talking about how we were convinced about how the emotions were
down and
coming
out.
across there. Yeah, absolutely. So he's definitely developed that side of his craft, and I also agree. Like he always seems like he could kick everybody's ass in the room no matter what. The way that everybody around him looks up to him or kind of gives him a bit of space, or like even Andy Garcia's cameoing crime lord, I'm not sure, or is he actually the head of the FBI?
I think he's meant to be an FBI director.
Yeah, but he knows who he is and he's quite happy to let him get up to whatever he wants to.
Yeah.
But even he like kind of, I'll give you that bit of space that you need because I'm not willing to cross you because I know what will happen if I do. So yeah, it toes that line really well.
Yeah, and there's lots of good in this film. The other thing I think you have to accept certain things. I've decided with certain directors, you have to meet them on their level. I'm not always willing to go to that level. Zack Snyder, I struggle sometimes with those kinds of films, but with Guy Ritchie, I know that when I'm going in, I'm expecting that there's a Guy Ritchie-ness to it. I mean, it's the same with any director. You go and watching a Michael Bay film, you go, "Oh, I'm meeting Michael Bay on Michael Bay's terms." And I feel it's the same with Guy Ritchie. Like you're going in, this is a Guy Ritchie universe. Like this is the Guy Ritchie world, and you have to accept it as such. That yes, there might be an FBI agent, but there's an astounding lack of police in other places, and it's all about gangsters being cool, and there's all these little bits. And I find that if you as long as you go in and accept it on those terms, it works a lot better. There's almost like I don't know. It's not fancy. It's not. It's just one of those sort of things that it's like with. I felt the same with John Wick. The first time I watched John Wick 3, I think it was. There's a scene where he's going through the the city on a horse, and then there's a whole thing with him on. They has the motorbike fight over the bridge. I remember watching it the first time and being like, why are none of the police responding to this? Like, why do I never see a policeman in these films? And then when you sit back and say, oh, it's because I'm in a John Wick universe. Like that's not the point. Then it goes along a little bit easier.
It's kind of like a heightened reality, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes.
It's one step removed. Yeah, and you're right. This is a Tough Guy Productions, isn't it? Which is Guy Ritchie's production company. When that comes up in the credits, that kind of tells you everything you need to know straight away. Known it's Guy Ritchie, and that's the name he's picked. Is actually perfect, I think, for his production company because it's TOFF, isn't it? Which is quite smart, to be fair. But like everyone has a nickname in this because, of course, they do because that's a Guy Ritchie thing. It's very testosterone and macho, and there's some really fun lines in this. I have to be they got me again the second time watching it. There's some like macho lines that feel like they're ripped right out of the 80s and put into this movie, which I appreciate, which is a Guy Ritchie trait too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Oh, I have to say, one of the things, the dialogue in this film
Mm-hmm.
swings the pendulum from awful dialogue through to not so much poetic, but like it has a rhythm, like a banter to it, like a, like a
Hmm.
there's like a patter to it, so between certain characters. But I was the opening scene of this film is it sort of follows the it's obviously an important scene because in fact it's the critical moment.
Mm.
But you
The inciting
follow
incident, isn't it?
the
Yeah.
the inciting incident, and we'll obviously get to the structure. But like this is you follow the two drivers of this armored vehicle,
Hmm.
and it's almost like they've been left to improv,
Hmm.
and they're
Hmm.
talking about like a coffee machine, but like both of them are sort of like it feels like they're thinking about their response constantly, and I was like, oh, this is trying to be like Tarantino-esque in
Hmm.
irreverence and cool, but really isn't pulling it off. And that was kind of worrying for me. But it gets slightly better
Yeah.
um throughout the
You know
film.
what they call Royale with cheese or whatever it is? Yeah, what they call a
Yeah.
Big Mac in France. Yeah, it's a bit like that, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. But I think you're right. I think it's those actors are perhaps they're just nons, aren't they? They're just hired for
Yes.
that scene. Once you get actors, and there
Mhm.
probably is a bit of improv, but when you've got like Holt, is it Holt McCallany? I don't know, he says something McCallany or something, but he's always like a welcome presence from
Oh yeah.
like Fight
Yes.
Club and from Mindhunter. He's
Yeah. And
Bullet
the
in this,
and
isn't he?
Claw recently. Yeah, he's Iron Claw. Yeah, he's
Iron
good
Claw, yeah,
actors.
yeah. So when you get actors like that who can pull off that kind of dialogue, then it's fine. Then you're home free because he has one of the good early ones when he gives Jason Statham's character, who at this point is going by Patrick Hill,
Yeah.
and it's like alias for the armored truck company. And he's like, he's H like the bomb or Jesus H. And it's
Yeah.
lines like that, which are it's cheesy saying it now,
It
but the way
is.
he can deliver it in the moment works. So
And
yeah,
that's what I
again,
mean. Yeah, there are
gone.
moments like that when you're right. That's a good moment when, like, because they're introducing him and he's going around and stuff. And there's little moments like that when it does work,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like eye rolling in a good way.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I think we're meant to be judging them because I mean,
yeah,
HR at this company are working overtime because
yeah,
there is way past the kind of PC line at this company for modern times because this feels like it's set just modern day.
mm.
It's echoing back to kind of 70s, isn't it? But it the technology and stuff is all now and the setting is all now. So yeah, I wouldn't fancy working in HR at Fortico.
Well, I think no, I think it'd be fine. And this is the reason is I wouldn't want to be a woman working at
No,
Fortico.
sure.
I felt yeah. What's it? There's even they've got like um his name's Dan, isn't it? Yeah.
No, no, yeah, we've got
Yeah.
yeah, the is it Nika
Niam
Algar,
Niam
the
Algar,
Irish
yeah.
person? Yeah.
Um, when she's in, I was like, she made me think of like Vasquez from
Mm-hmm,
Alien.
hmm. Hmm.
Where I was like, oh, you're the sort of like obligatory like badass chick in this. Okay, you're like one of the lads, one of the guys, kind of thing. Um, but yeah, it was kind of funny. But I was thinking, there's no complaints made to HR in this company.
No, I suppose not. Good point. Yeah.
It's not that kind of place.
No.
um, so yeah, no, it's an interesting setup. I think I want to talk about the structure of the film, but
Mm.
one of the things I wanted to sort of I struggle to accept. We're talking about this, you have to accept Guy Ritchie on his terms. This is his universe. This is the universe built for this film. The one of the key things you have to accept for this film is that there are multiple gangs all willing and wanting to rob the same armored car
Yeah.
security firm. Multiple gangs all at the same time. And
Yeah.
and that bit kind of like I was like, it feels really contrived. Where I was sort of like, oh, this feels weird, but
Mm.
um,
And that whole kind of first section when Stace Hill is being introduced to Force Co guys, they do keep going on and on about the fact like it's such a dangerous job and we're always getting targeted. And you kind of think like, oh, yeah, they're bigging it up. They're giving him the big up because he's the new guy. But
yeah,
no, they're absolutely accurate. Like every 3 or so months, there's a really serious attack on one of their vans that was, with explosions, tear gas, shootouts, deaths. Yeah,
Yeah,
the hazard pay they deserve for what it's doing a blue collar job, right?
yeah, but it's the fact that like the thing is, the reason you're right, and they do try and big it up, and I think so. They're trying to sort of give it that justification of like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you have Josh Hartnett's
Is it boy sweat or bad sweat?
Boy Sweat Dave,
Boy
yeah.
sweat, yeah.
He's always bigging it up, isn't it, about how dangerous it is, and he's sort of like he's trying to big up how sort of
He's
like
the alpha, isn't he?
yeah, and he's a bit sort of insecure about Statham coming along, but H coming along.
Mm.
But the thing is, like, okay, they do that, and then you say it's sort of a matter of months, but like within the context of this film, in a matter of weeks, no days even, or weeks, they get attacked by some sort of like Hispanic, gangbangers, and that sort of elevates Statham's character H up because that's the first time. And then it happens again, and obviously, he just shows his face, and they back off, and everyone's like, "What the hell's that about?" And then that's
I think that's 3 months later. I think that's when the caption comes up, isn't that one?
Yeah. And then you obviously get the fight, but then you obviously realise even before that, like I say, it all works back round too. But the fact of the matter is that this inciting incident, when it's all played out and it's all multiple timelines and all the narrative of it all of a sudden is laid out, you realise that he was watching an armored car to rob it when it was about to be robbed. So lots of things where I'm just like, this all feels like gangster's paradise. Like this film is like some odd, like I don't know. It was just funny to me that I was like, this is the thing I've got to accept. The contrivance of, well, we need the gang that he can beat up to show how good he is, and then then the second one sort of needed to lay suspicion, and then you need the third gang because that's the inciting incident. So it works, but it was just funny to me.
No, I hear you on all of that. Absolutely, it's I made notes of so many different films that this felt like, and actually really deliberately felt like it was echoing. Obviously, Heat, but also The Town, the Ben Affleck movie, which I think is really underrated.
It's a really good film. Yeah.
But that's obviously led by Heat as well. And then there's this, but there's moments of dialogue as well where, like, I think it's one of the men who work for the State's actual criminal crew, because he's undercover, isn't he, at Fortico?
Yeah.
And one of the men who work for his crew, when we get the section of the film, and I'm the same as you, like we've got to talk about the structure at some point. The section of the film we see them kind of going around trying to find out who was responsible for the flashback scene 5 months previous. And he says like several times, it isn't any of the usual suspects. And just the way he was delivering that line just felt like really like, we want you to be thinking about the usual suspects.
Yeah. The heat is on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the actual crew who then do the big job at the end, they kept saying like, oh, we've got an inside man. And again, that's a brilliant Spike Lee movie all about kind of bank heists and stuff. So it felt like at certain points, though, like Guy Ritchie really wanted to say like, oh, look, these are the films I like. These are the films.
Oh, I bet he was pissing himself laughing. He was because when you look at who wrote this film, because it is just a Toffman production, it's his boys. This is the same guys that wrote The Gentleman and what was the Amazon film he did recently? Operation Fortune, Operation Fortune, and there was another one I noted that they'd written together. That was like,
is it the soldier one?
The Covenant, yes.
Yes, yeah.
That's good, because I've watched that. I really like that film. So I was like, oh, I can imagine this is 3 or 4 guys that clearly like each other getting together, and I can imagine, as we're sort of like noticing, I bet they thought it was hilarious. What other films can we get in? If they could have got in The Bank Job in some way, I bet they'd have been over the moon. But you're right. It's all it's a weird film in the fact that like it's clear, like you say, everyone is enjoying. You can tell people are enjoying this. It's an easy watch in the sense of people are doing a good job. And I think they all sort of suit. It's good to see Josh Hartnett. I think Josh Hartnett is a good actor. I think went off the boil for some reason, but it's does a good job. So everyone seems to work. But yeah, there's also this kind of it's kind of like a gritty, crime actioner drama. I don't know. It's sort of in that middle ground, isn't it? Yeah. There's clearly like it's still doing that, but you still get the wink and the nudge, which is the typical Guy Ritchie kind of thing. Yeah,
I agree. But thankfully, like scaled right back there.
Yes,
like it's there for you to notice it if you want to, but it's not ostentatious. It's not in your face, which so much of his other stuff is.
No, and that's fair. And I think it's the right call to do
Agreed.
that. Like,
Yeah.
go do that in The Gentleman, or go do that, if you want to sort of revisit, your Lock, Stock universe, but that's not for this universe.
No, I completely agree. Shall we talk about we keep like so let's talk about the structure. Should we talk about the structure here? So well, before we get that, just you're right, we get that opening scene and then we get this opening titles. What did you think of like the kind of James Bondian
I
title
love them.
sequence?
I miss titles like this. Whenever a film sort of puts money into doing like a really cool title sequence, I'll always watch it and I'm like, yeah, cool. You've made the effort of doing something a bit different.
Yeah.
Fair play. I'll stick it out. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I just wasn't sure it's quite in keeping with the.
Oh no, completely different film.
That's probably the one point where it doesn't really fit, and then it's like, as you said, like gritty and crime and murder.
That felt like the kind of thing he would have done for like Operation Fortune, or The Gentleman, or that kind of thing. But it felt out of place. But I was still like, yeah, cool. I'll go with it.
I wonder if that's him saying, like, if you need a new director for Bond, I'm around, guys. I wonder if that was his little kind of
And then they watch the film and they're like, we're not having Jason Statham play Bond, and it's just.
I tell you what, though, I'd watch it.
It'd be interesting, yeah.
And then we get the first of our 4 title cards. So it's a 4-act movie, which is really unusual for a film, not unusual for a book. And actually, the thing I think I want to say is that since doing Parker with the Stath a few movies ago, and then I watched a lot of the Parker movies for fun, but also I've started reading the Parker books by Richard Stark. And that absolutely must be an inspiration on this, because he often writes with this 4-act structure.
Okay.
Almost pretty much exactly like this is. So you get the kind of build up to the heist, and then the actual heist itself, which is kind of the first 2 acts.
Yeah.
Which ends badly for Parker, basically every single time.
Yeah.
Then you get the flashback of like how the people who are double crossing him did it absolutely, and got to that point. And then you come back to the present, if you like, and you see like Parker then dealing with them once he's recovered from the shot or being put in prison or whatever it is that continually keeps happening to him. So whether it's a direct reference to that or not, I don't know, but it definitely seems to hit those fairly closely. Hits those points, doesn't it? This movie.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good. Yeah, that's pretty. You're probably right. It's a really good structure to have for this, because it works. It does feel. I mean, it feels quite literary in that sense of, it's. And again, as you said, I think the fact that he resists going the full Statham and having all the sort of the bombasticness feels the same. They're trying to sort of keep it toned down and stuff. So, yeah, I think I've not really read in the Parker books. Probably something I should do one day.
Yeah, they're good.
But I've seen Parker and I've seen the Mel Gibson one.
Payback, yeah.
Payback.
Point Blank. The Lee Marvin.
Oh, I haven't. No, I've never seen that. No,
that's great.
I should watch that. Yeah, maybe that'll be the thing for the summer. I'll do some. I'm doing a Mel Gibson thing as well at the moment, so so that'll definitely on the rewatch. Anyway, not to go off a tangent, but yeah. So the structure works, but the other thing I would say is about how it's delivered, because you do have this structure, and it can be because obviously since Pulp Fiction in '94, this sort of style comes up where this sort of the non-linear presentation of a story where you have to sort of put it together. And I will say, like 8 times out of 10, it kind of falls down. It's not always done very well. But I do think it hangs together pretty well in this case. I think it all works, and you don't feel like you're missing any information by the end of the film. So kudos for that.
Yeah, I think it's paced interestingly, because it's not like an even split between the 4. It's almost like watching a streaming show nowadays. Rather than like old school TV formats where like everything had to be 42 minutes long to fit in with the advert breaks, whereas obviously now people can make each episode for as long as they want. It feels almost like that. Like I need 40 minutes for the first chapter, A Dark Spirit, because I need to lay all the groundwork, and then actually Scorched Earth, because it's the flashback, probably could be 20-25 minutes. I don't need as long for that. So it's really interesting that that he's taken that approach as well. It's not
Mm.
sort of like 30, 30, 30, 30. It's not like blocks, which I think helps a little bit in that the story is just unfolding
Naturally.
naturally. Yeah. So even though
Mm.
it's jumping around in time in the timeline, the pacing is pretty good, I think.
Yeah, no, I think the pacing works really well. I think the pacing works enough that you never sort of feel like you're hanging around.
Mm. Hmm.
You know, because I think again, there'd be the desire or the inclination sometimes, especially if you're doing a flashback, is
Yeah.
to be like, okay, well, I've got to fill up more information, and we can do more in the flashback, and you want to sort of resist that because you just got to tell what you've got to tell, like,
Hmm.
because we're going to want to see back to the present as to why this is important. We don't want to spend too much time. And I think I've seen lots of films where the flashback scenes end up becoming a bit cumbersome.
Yeah.
So I think Guy Ritchie's always had this. He has a knack for this.
Hmm.
But for all of his faults in other films, I don't think pace is ever an issue
Mm.
with a Guy Ritchie film. I think he's able to judge things quite well, to say, like, okay, you know, this is running at a punchy pace, or
Mm.
able to slow things down when needed to. I think from a director and editing standpoint, I think he's actually really good at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of this film particularly cuts just at the right moment, doesn't it? So I
Mm.
guess like maybe we'll break them down by 4 sections in a minute, but like it kind of like when you're left really really curious about what's driving Hill, what's driving the Stace character, he chooses that's the exact moment when we're going to cut. He's just sort of been interrogating Dana, hasn't he? And then it cuts from there back to the flashback, and then when you sort of know you've well, there's a natural place when that stops, I suppose, but you've got enough information for that. Then we cut to who the perpetrators are and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think he intuitively, particularly here, knows exactly where to bring that section to an end. I think it's
Yes.
paced really well, and it starts with a dark spirit, and all the lines are a little bit pretentious, but they're all actual lines of dialogue from the section as well, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. I think it works well. If this opening section, as you say,
Hmm.
sort of, um, yeah, because you have, is it, I can't remember if it's a prelude. You get the bit where you see the whole sort of the the initial bank heist from one perspective.
Yeah, so that's
That's
like
all
almost like
pre.
pre-credit
That's a
sequence, isn't
yeah.
it?
There's a
Yeah,
preset credit sequence. So you've got all that, and then it cuts to this. I see this first section, and it's just
which is like his
Statham.
first day on the job, isn't
Yes,
it? Like,
it's like,
yeah.
yeah, H joining, getting called H, and him joining and being shown around, and as Bullet is Holt McCartney's character, and he's just like, yeah, you're a social animal, like you're making friends left, right, and center, like, and it's all. And I kind of like the fact that it's interesting because he isn't like he's not wasting time with people. He's like, I'm not here to make friends. Like it's
Mm.
clearly I'm here for something else. Um, and he has all these interactions. And it's all it's one of those things where I think that it mostly work again. It all works. I think it all works fine.
Hmm.
Um, there's just a couple of like interactions that again, and when they're played out later,
Hmm.
it feels better. But like the pool scene, like the pool
Yeah.
hall.
So that's
So
where they
also,
all go and hang out in the evening, isn't it? After a hard day's work. Yeah.
yeah, and the other guy sort of comes and has a bit of a go at him and sort of like, starts being a tough guy towards him and stuff.
Yeah.
And he ends up sort of, he says, look, I'll buy you a drink as long as you go drink it over there, and tells him sort of to piss off. And all of that, I'm like, this feels like so overly macho and sort of like unneeded. Like, what is this all about?
Mm.
Obviously, it does have a payoff, like you learn it later on, but it doesn't. And this is one of the things I will raise with this thing, that there are certain, let's say, motivational or logistical payoffs for
Hmm.
things, but there's quite a few character things that don't pay off.
Yeah.
And so this interaction between this guy, and what's funny is, and especially the guy, I forget, I'm going to find the guy's name
I
because
was
I've
just
seen.
looking up. It's Alex Ferns is the actor playing John. He's like
That's
the
it.
guy who sits behind the booth, isn't he?
Yeah,
Scanning the vans in and out. Yeah.
and I like him because he's been in lots of things. He's been in quite a few things. He's obviously a bit of a stalwart of like British TV, and he was in
Yeah.
um
He's Scottish, isn't he?
Chernobyl.
I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
that's what's funny because he's Scottish, putting on
Mm.
like an American accent, and then he has to put on an English accent, and I'm like, well, you're all over the place there. This is brilliant. And like, so I really like him in it. But that interaction
Hmm.
of, I'm like, this feels like they're trying to put up when they start talking about who's the inside man later
Mm-hmm.
on, I feel a little bit like you're supposed that they've had these interactions where I'm like, oh, they're throwing up suspects.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got like John, and then you've got Dave, and then you've got, you know, is it Dana? Yeah,
Yeah,
Dana.
Danny, and then you've got Shirley, who's the guy who's got like the milky eyes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've got all these people that you're sort of going, okay, look, it's thrown up these suspects of who is the inside man, and obviously,
Mm-hmm.
spoilers, we'll get to who it is. But even the ones that aren't feel like they should have like more of a character payoff, and
Yeah.
they kind of, well, it's not kind of, they just don't, and that part frustrates me. And I'm going to talk about when we get to the end. I want to talk about Jason Statham's arc as well in this, and
Mm-hmm.
some issues I have with that. But all of it's good. I mean, it's all very macho, and it also has logistical reasons. But yes, it's all good. You know, the first day on the job when they go out, and so this is where some of the dialogue kind of works when they're talking about the flirty middle-aged women in the office and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
That it all feels very in a very male macho environment. I can totally accept and believe these conversations are going on. You know.
Yeah, there's an authenticity to all this stuff, I think.
Yeah.
That was missing from what you said about that opening sequence with the driver and that here that kind of Tarantino-esque. No, this is more like a man-esque, I would say, like a
Yes.
man-esque authenticity to the procedural nature of what their job is and who they meet every day, and yeah.
For all intents and purposes, their job's really boring.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a dangerous job at times. There's a high tension to it, but their job's kind of boring.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they've managed to sort of give themselves this macho aura so that they can sort of tell themselves how important or how macho their job is. And really, it's not, you know. But it's kind of, you can tell that that's what they've done. They now sort of like, this is what they do. Like, we guard these millions of dollars, and we carry guns and da da da. So it's all part and parcel of like the chest puffing up, isn't it? Like, this is all sort of like macho bullshit. And it's kind of funny that like Jason Statham starts calling several people on it when he's like, I'm legit tough. You're all a bunch of pussies talking about it. You know, this is ridiculous. But I think that's what it is. And it comes across as that sort of like macho banter, doesn't it? Sort of like there's a patter to it, which works and it's good.
Yeah, definitely.
And as you say, it feels authentic. But it feels authentic in that posturing and preening kind of way that we do as men.
Yeah,
you know,
there's a bravado and is it a brigadio or something, where it's called, like, where it's like it's not quite, it's all kind of that fakeness. You're right, and I think it's their interpretation of almost like paramedics gallows humor, isn't it?
Yes,
like, because there are these flash moments when they have to be like quite intense and macho. They feel like they have to pump themselves up all the time, and it is interesting. It's like kind of like the new kid at school that everyone immediately starts looking up to, or like in Justified when Raylan turns up at the office with Harlan and everyone's head turns because he looks like Timothy Oliphant and he wears a cool cowboy hat and he has a swagger. The Stath is like this here, isn't he? Like, he's turning heads. Everyone's like, oh, actually, we can tell this guy is actually nails. He's got his accent for once in this as well. He's not playing American.
No,
they talk about the fact that he's British. And of course, Dana, the one woman, even though she is the Vasquez woman, I agree, she is immediately like, I'm getting me some of that.
Yes.
She's quite happy to tell everyone, like, yep, I'm getting on that.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Everyone's head is turned, isn't it, when he comes in?
Yeah. And I love the fact that, just as a side note, they justify his British accent, and they're like, you know, he even says, "Oh, I think I'm going to go home to Britain or home to London for a bit."
Yes, right. Yeah.
And his son's over, you know, on holiday and all this other stuff. And it felt it reminded me of sort of like Arnie films when they're sort of in some films, they're like, we kind of got to justify his accent. So we're going to make, you know, we'll give some drop line of where he's from. Or they did it with Jean-Claude Van Damme in several films as well.
Always, yeah. Born in Hong Kong, but raised in Paris. It's double impact, yeah. But yeah, the one that stayed in Hong Kong still has the same Belgian accent. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, all this stuff's good. I think all this sort of stuff works. This whole sort of initial setup, it gives you all the information you need. It kind of and this is where I think some of the structures, I will say, because you don't fully know what you don't know why Statham is there yet, but it's still setting up suspects without there being a mystery. And that bit, I think, is a problem.
Okay, yeah.
And I think again, you know I was going to do this. I was going to rewrite.
Yeah, go on, go for
Because
it.
there are two. You've obviously got Andy Garcia, who I've just checked. He's called Agent King, so he is FBI. And then you've got these sort of two pointless FBI agents that sort of like crop up early on as well. They could have easily had a drop line that just says, "We suspect." The only way this could have worked is we suspect that there was someone on the inside that did that. Whatever that the kid was killed, but we suspect the robbery was a result of an inside person.
Yeah.
At least then you'd know that, all these people are being set up for us to look at them individually and go, okay, are you the inside man? But
it's interesting because that's a definite decision he's made to avoid, isn't it?
Yes.
He's definitely decided, I want this really kind of slow burn start. I want you to know he's there with a different mission, because there's a moment when he stops, isn't there, in front of all the photos of all the employees. And the first time we see it, it looks like he's just staring at them, which I love that shot. It's like he's almost like the Terminator, like logging all the names and stuff. And then later on, we actually see that he's got his camera, his phone hidden down, taking pictures of it. But we get this slow burn, don't we? And this is when we get like a couple of different heists, and those two guys come in, don't they, after the first heist, because he kills everyone in the coolest Jason Statham way that he could do, like single, like fucking Call of Duty or something, like single headshots for all these guys. And that's when these two like kind of bumbling, I suppose, is the best way I can put it, kind of FBI agents, like comedy psychic relief characters.
Oh yeah,
and
totally.
And they're like, oh, it's definitely him. And then that's when Andy Garcia's head honcho was like, let the painter paint, which I thought was quite a cool line. And they're like, what does he mean?
I love the fact that was my favorite with their response. He says it and they're like, what the fuck's he talking about?
Yeah. So I think that's all conscious, and he wants us to be questioning everything without showing his hand yet.
And I think that idea of a painter is this first act, this first block is very much that. There's a lot of color, there's a lot of information, but you're not kind of sure what it is. Like, what is it
like,
I'm looking at? I'm looking at the moment.
It's like a Neil Buchanan art attack.
It is. Yeah, you just need the right angle. That's what it is, isn't it?
Size pictures
you're looking at it from the wrong angle at the beginning. There's lots there, but I'm not sure what I'm looking at until you sort of shift your vision. One of the things I would say, that first heist, and you say that Statham taking them out, is good. It's really well done. I think, again, it's very cool. I love the fact he sort of faked how he didn't want to show that he was a crack shot in his assessment. And so that's one of the things they call out. They're like, you barely made it in, and all of a sudden, you're this sort of gun expert kind of thing. But there's a guy, one of them escapes. One of the bank, the heist, the robbers escapes, and he sort of tracks him down and kills him in cold blood. Which I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have got away with, like the FBI. But they all have they obviously cover for him, don't they? They sort of create this cover story. But there is a moment when he's on his own when that happens, and then Bullet and Dave see it, and they come into this room in this sort of warehouse or whatever, and both of them have a look on their face of like, what the fuck? They've been a little bit intimidated by this. They've sort of kept their heads down, and he's done all this, which is all fine. But to chase this guy down and kill him, both of them are sort of like, Bullet in particular is like, no, he's good and everything like this, but like he's probably a little bit of a loose cannon. But like Dave in particular is like, no, the guy's a nutcase.
Yeah. And that leads directly into what I think is my favorite moment in this whole movie, is when him and Dana have hooked up. And we sort of see them flirting a bit, and then the next shot we see is them lying in bed together. We don't see any of the actual kind of sexy time with them in between, but then we cut back to Dave and to Bullet talking in the pool bar, don't we? And that's when they're like, something is not right with this guy. And I can't remember whether I think it's Bullet who says to Boy Sweat, he says like, he's a dark fucking spirit.
Yeah.
And at that point it cuts. It's a hard cut. It's brilliant, to the bed, and his half of it's now empty. And Dana's laying there, and you're like, oh fuck, where is he? What's he doing? It's a really, really good edit. Like, whether that was planned or whether they got it in the edit suite, I don't know. but it was a moment for me that was just, it was a real, like, I can imagine them in the edit suite going like, "Oh yeah, that's the one. We've got that.
Perfect.
Perfect." Yeah.
There's a couple of scenes like that where they'll get a shot, and what you said, there's hard cuts and some edits that really do work.
Mm.
I think are just so well done. But yeah, that's the first one. Obviously, then he interrogates Dana, and she's got this
Yes.
money, and because he thinks that she has been paid off because she's got 125K, and she's like, no. So it basically turns out someone just didn't sign for it, so it was in claim. So she was just like, yoink.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, fair play. And that's where you start to realize like there's something, he's after something, like he's investigating something.
Yeah, because we've seen somebody else come to his apartment, haven't we? And she's given him all the information on all the employees and the autopsy report, and that's all we know at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
it's
he's got a really
well.
nice, and he's got a really nice line here as well. It's kind of Taken-esque. It has that air to it. I'm not sure, it hasn't got that iconic status, but when he's talking to Dana, he's got a line when he says, "I know who you love, and I do bear a grudge." The way he delivers it is really quite nice, actually. It's the heaviness on the "I do" that he puts into his delivery was really quite cool, and you can see like she's proper actually shaken by it.
Yeah, because he puts like a photo down, doesn't he? It's his mum and dad, or mum and dad. Yeah, and you can see like he's used to being a heavy, like he's used to being, But this is the thing, like throughout the film, he'll continually start to do, like, and this is where when I think back on it, could somebody else have done this in the place of Statham? You have to be very careful for a role like this because he's an anti-hero. Like this is a true anti-hero. Like you want him to succeed when you find out his mission, but he's not a good guy.
100%, yeah.
And so you need him. I think he plays the anti-hero well, but you couldn't have someone who's like too milquetoast, too sort of like white bread. You couldn't have someone who's too goody-goody. You have to believe that actually, this guy's quite comfortable, doing whatever. That does come. I'll wait to the end because actually that does come to one of my niggles about this film actually, and about what this film's about, and what is wrong with Statham's character, not in the editing, but like let's say mentally.
Yeah. Because and then that's where we edit, isn't it? This is the point. He sort of says like, you get to keep the money, but watch it.
Yeah.
And then that's where we now get our next title card. We get Scorched Earth, and this is our flashback section of the movie, isn't it? Where we learn why he's there, what his motivation is, what his history is, where he's come from. We get to see his whole little kind of team of criminal gangsters around him, don't we?
Yes. Yeah, and his son, like the relationship he has with his son.
Yes, most importantly, of course. Yeah.
Again, which I like. Like, there's a great moment. I don't know if he knows him. I don't know if they had any, but they seem to work quite well together. Like he says, "Go get your." He got a phone call. He's like, "Go get your coat." He's like, "It's not raining." He's like, "Get your coat. I'm your dad." But he still sort of leans into him and sort of like jokingly, and then the lad sort of leans in, and I was just like, okay, that feels,
there's a naturalness to it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a jokiness to it. But yeah, he I like the fact they're all scared of him, though. This is where you learn that he's got some authority, and he is, because the guy that ringing him's like, "Look, we've got nobody else. Can you just do this 5-minute job? It's all about the robbery. We are also watching Ford to go inexplicably. Can you go watch this? All you need to know is which way does it turn out of this building? We need to just map the route." But the guy who was supposed to have done it has been hit by a drunk driver, and he just keeps saying, "Tell the boss it was not my fault. It was a drunk driver." Like, if you fuck up for this guy, like there are consequences. So yeah, but you get like these relationships and this dual life he's obviously had, where like I don't know how much his son knows about what he does and who he really is. But this is obviously where you get to see the other side of, or the first one you see. Yeah, it builds up to you seeing the other side of the events of the start of the film.
Yeah.
And you find out that his son is killed by another gang, and you find out they're a military,
yeah,
former military unit.
Yeah, we learn that in part 3, don't we? But
yeah,
yeah, we get to see, I think, you know, you and I are sophisticated viewers. I think the precision of how they do that job, you're immediately like, oh, okay, there's a military position going on here. But yeah, it's fully revealed, isn't it, in the next
It
section?
is, yeah. In fact, I want to go back to one of the parts in that first part actually, because
Yeah.
there's something really important because you just sort of know it, and you've referenced Heat, and you sort of go, okay, these are trained guys, like you know, these aren't the gangbangers that you saw that was a little chaotic in the first act.
Mm.
And you don't see all the footage. You see that
Oh yeah,
Statham
yeah,
gets to
yeah.
watch it. You see little bits of it, and then he stops it, and they're asking Statham's character, "Is this the people that you saw today?
Hmm.
Are they linked with what we're showing you on the video?" And he's watching, going like, "Absolutely not." Like, and he knows what he's watching,
Hmm.
and he
Hmm.
obviously it's kind of brutal for him to see it, and he's focusing in on that one guy, and you realize like that's who he's after. This little pixelated person
Hmm.
is who he's after. But you can see from the way they're maneuvering and holding their guns and everything, you're like, oh, this
Yeah,
is like a trained unit. This is a completely different kettle of fish. Like this isn't a
yeah.
bunch of gangbangers demanding money. Like, this is a whole different setup.
It's just Neil McCauley and his gang. Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, I like that. Yes, you're right, but you do sort of make that connection.
You
I was
do.
like, okay, this is cool, different thing. But yes. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we've got this whole sort of flashback bit. Carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't decide myself whether it's using the cliche knowingly or whether it's just cliched that, you know, his son is accidentally caught up and shot and that's his motivation. Sort of it feels a little bit easy, but we definitely need a strong motivation for why we should root for him. So, you know, I can't think of anything else, but also it feels like just a little bit too leaned into the expected, really. I'm not sure how you feel about it.
This is okay. We need to get to. I've been. Hold on. This is the point where I'm sort of like I have a problem
Yeah,
with
go
this
on.
film because the film is a revenge film.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's a heist film but it's a revenge
Yeah.
driven thing. So Statham is Punisher. He is Maximus. He's all these revenge.
Hmm.
If you ever seen like Peppermint, all those kinds of
Hmm.
things. Um, the problem I have, and he's more Death Wish than he is, one of these other ones. You need someone to die in
Hmm.
order to sort of instigate that, or to have something happen. I don't know if you've ever seen Death Wish 1 and 2, in particular with Charles Bronson, where his daughter sexually assaulted him, but both the first and second film, and you're kind of like, Jesus
Oof.
Christ, like
I've
like
seen the first one, and that is a really hard scene to watch. I've
yeah,
never seen the sequel.
yeah. Don't. It's not a franchise worth following up. In all honesty, um, you need that death to happen. You need that tragedy, okay,
Hmm.
to be the motivator. So I'm fine with that. Like it needs to happen. It feels again a little contrived of like he
Mm.
parked the car in a place just far enough that
Yeah,
um
he
you
could
know
get back in time to stop it, but
yeah, and
his
the
son
cars
could
yeah
be a
he had,
witness, and
exactly
yeah.
his son had to get stuck at the car. For me, what would have been better would have been that a shootout ends up sort of happening between the Fortico guard, which it
Hmm.
does, and Scott Kahn's character. Not Scott Kahn, sorry, Scott Eastwood.
Hmm.
Um, and his son accidentally being shot.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because the execution element sort of sets up the Eastwood's character as being this sort of psycho and a bit of a loose cannon.
Yeah.
Um, but like you're right, him pulling him out of the car and having him lie on the floor. It's the moment that happens, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is now inevitable. Like there's
Yeah.
no way around this. Um, and so it all just feels that it feel this is the one of the problems. It feels partly contrived. Like there's things that keep
Hmm.
happening in this film that feel contrived. Where I'm like, if it had been caught in the crossfire, or even if like he'd have been because he's
Like a bullet through the window of the car, or
exactly bullet
yeah.
through a window, or he gets out the car to see, because he hears the shots and panics and gets out the car and gets shot in the crossfire. Something where it's like
Hmm.
it could have been avoided, would have been more meaningful, I think, to me at least, in the way it works.
Hmm.
Um, because if it's an execution, that's the
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
It's
because
an
he's seen his.
execution.
Cause he gets his mask pulled down, doesn't he? The Jan
Yes.
character. Yeah, so he has to execute him because he's seen his face. Yeah.
Yeah. So it becomes this sort of like it's an execution, so of course he's got to go on the warpath. Like it's almost an obligation. Like it's almost like a macho thing, isn't it? Like a life for a life kind of thing, an eye for an eye.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was an accident, it's still a terrible thing, but it kind of throws up more of the this is the randomness of life. Like, what do you do about it? Like, it feel more a bit
Yeah.
like, again, Frank Castle kid, the Punisher's kids and wife being killed. They get caught in the crossfire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what drives the Punisher mad, is the randomness of it, the pointlessness of it. Like they know, and I hate the fact that later in some, in issues, they're like, even in the MCU version or the Netflix, they're like, no, you were targeted. I'm like, no, that's not the point. You're missing the point. So to have Statham's kid killed as an execution in this thing. But one of the things is that this is where it starts to sort of, I get problems with Statham's character being so stoic and everything, is I don't know how he feels about, other than he has to kill Scott Eastwood's character. Elvis, I think it's called. Is it called Elvis?
Jan, I think.
Jan, yeah.
Yeah.
So, other than he's got to kill him, I know nothing about how he feels about the death of his son.
Yeah.
Is he torn up about it? Is it, does he feel guilty because of where he parked? Does he feel guilty because, or by association, because they were planning on robbing the truck in a similar way? I know nothing, absolutely nothing. I get his motivation from this is A, this is B, we're going to have this situation, but I have no idea how he feels about this. There's no, and I don't want him like crying over I don't want like a Martin Riggs moment where he's going to try and kill himself or anything. And I get this little bit, but it never feels like, that it's torn him up.
No, I hear you. It's really interesting. I think I haven't really thought of that before. But even if it's another getaway vehicle and they crash into their car, because then he can still get an injury and stuff, can't they? Because Stath is supposed to be taking his son to like a sports match of some kind, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And he goes out of his way to, as you said, to go and watch where this vehicle comes from. All of that could have been cut out, and I think probably you would have felt all that contrivance would have gone away. And if they'd just been driving to the sports mats they're supposed to be going to, and the heist vehicle hits them on the way through, and he gets killed, or as you said, they're driving through and there's a crossfire and he gets hit in the crossfire, or I think that
I don't mind them. I don't want them being pulled over for burritos or hot dogs or whatever the fuck it is they stopped. I don't even mind that so much. It's the fact of like, oh, you park the car beyond the construction line where he has to put. All that's the bit that sort of feels, a bit too contrived. But the other thing as well is, one of the things that I think, and I want to get to this point, because they do refer to him as a psychopath. At one point, one of the guys, one of the Fortico managers, another actor that pops up a lot and I like, who's now
yeah. He's just recently been in the Fast. Eddie Marsan.
Eddie Marsan, yeah, he's another great actor
Shaw as well. Yeah,
yeah, I like him a lot in things. He says that, no, I think he's a psychopath. Like, there's clearly something not right with this guy. Fine, if he is a psychopath, and that sort of like, acknowledge that, like have his wife acknowledge that in some way, because she obviously turns up for a brief scene. But one of the things I think the thing with revenge films is revenge should take a toll on the person taking revenge. It should make them worse in the case of like the Punisher, or it should like, they should die at the end in the case of like Maximus from the Gladiator, or if you've ever seen like Peppermint or any of those sort of films, like the one with Kevin Bacon in, the point of a revenge,
Death Sentence, isn't it?
Death Sentence, which is I think a really good film. The act of revenge should actually not be glorified, and I think that's the problem with it. But the fact with this film is, when you get to the end after everything, and it sort of comes back to this point, there's a moment it's all done, and we'll get to the sort of the final things. And Andy Garcia's character sort of says to him, "So it's done." He says, "Yeah, it's done," and he walks off into the night, and that's the credits.
Yeah.
And again, I'm like, so what? What's the arc that you've had
Mm-hmm.
as a character? Like, are you now reflecting on your life of crime, or are you going to go back to armed robberies of um armored vehicles tomorrow? Like, I don't understand. Has this had any impact on you? You've now met the people that work on the other side of this. You've broken bread with them, and you've seen them. And is he a different person? What has the act of revenge at the end of this changed him? I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. This section here reminded me of there's a TV show called Too Old to Die Young, which is
Hmm.
Nicholas Winding Refn and working with Ed Brubaker.
Okay.
It's a really interesting show. It's very Refn, depending on how. I know a lot of people either love him or hate him. I'm much more in the love him camp. I think I love him for his flaws and for things that he does as wrong as he does right. But it's a very that show is very languid in what it does, very
Hmm.
slow paced, and does exactly what you're talking about. Never really tells you how people feel about things. The camera holds on them often for like 30 seconds, a minute, and it's just them sitting there, like almost like in their internal thoughts. And there's no narration, there's no dialogue. It's kind of left for you to imprint onto them what you
Hmm.
think they're feeling. So that largely that's why this section here, when we see the Stace character going around with his gang, and as you said, like basically not emoting at all, I sort of felt like it was offering me the opportunity to do that. Um, but I take to hear where you're coming from. I don't think there's an arc for him, but I wonder
Hmm.
whether that there's in the clue is in the title that I am Wrath. He is just that one thing, and we are only meeting him at this point in his life, aren't we?
Yeah.
Where that's all he exists for. So therefore,
But
there
wrath
isn't
is
anything else for him.
but wrath is one of the seven deadly sins.
Hmm.
So there should be a punishment for it in film. Not in, maybe that's where you're going to go. But the point of this is,
Mm.
if you're going to do that, he's already a bad guy. So it's the question of, in many of these revenge films, it's a good guy going bad
Yeah.
out of desperation or out of wrath, and then you
Hmm.
realize that actually the act of vengeance and the act of wrath is just as bad as the killing in the first place. That's
Hmm.
kind of the point in seriously watch. Yeah, go watch Death Sentence, the Kevin Bacon one. Like, it's never articulated better than in that film. Of how, like, a regular guy just sort of descending into the mess of it all. Um, or it is someone who is already in a bad place,
Hmm.
taking revenge, and it actually then it gives them a way out. It gives them an act of um, redemption, or a
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
In the act of it, they end up sacrificing either themselves or something in order to better the life of somebody else. Like, they meet a new family, or a new surrogate in some way that allows them to recover,
Mm.
and make the world a better place. Think Harry Brown or something like that. Um, but in this, like you say, it's just wrath. There is that.
Yeah.
It's this act of violence, and then he returns back to normal. And it's like, yeah, but for me, and I hear what you're saying about the show, and actually that sounds like cool. I might actually try that out. Um, I'm kind of like character and not just narrative driven. I
Mm.
like the character moments, and the fact I feel like you can say he's a force of nature.
Hmm.
There's that sort of justification, but I don't feel he is that kind of character either. He's not like a force of nature because I don't know. It's too precise. It irks me that at the end of this, there's no reflection
Mm. No,
for
he gets
what's
back
gone
in the
on.
car with the guy who
Yeah,
couldn't turn up because his bike got driven into by the drunk driver, and just drives off, it seems, to go back to his life as it was before. Yeah,
yeah.
true.
So yeah, I just wanted to get that off my chest. That's my biggest fault of this film that kind of
Mm.
pulls me out of it a little bit.
No, I think it's totally fair. I don't think we're ever likely to see a sequel. I don't think we're going to get Wrath of Man 2. I don't think we'll know whatever happened to him. But yeah, it's something I talk about when I teach, actually. When I teach kind of narrative, really interesting to have this conversation. I really try to impress upon students about the idea of like what we're studying and what I want you to then obviously go on and write is just a section of a story. And then I talked about actors, how they often create whole backstories, or directors, they create whole backstories. And there's this sense of like, you're just seeing this part of the
most important story of their lives. Yeah.
of the larger kind of map, and we don't know where that began and where it ends. And so it's a really interesting point. Like, there clearly was a different side to him, as you said, from the interaction we see with him with his son. There is a kind of a jokiness and a jovial and a he did have that in him, but that's totally gone, isn't it? For the character we see in the movie. So I guess there probably is there's interesting scope for imagining what his life might be afterwards. I don't think we're never going to see it, but yeah, I don't know. I think I totally hear where you're coming from. I think I quite like it, but and maybe it's because of my experience of watching that show and being uncomfortably forced to at times. At times it goes on almost like uncomfortably long. That you're almost like, well, when are you going to cut? When are you going to cut? When are you going to cut? And then actually, Refn chooses to cut, and you're like, oh, actually, that was the right point to cut because I had one more thought that I wanted to get out. It's very, very clever. But it definitely won't be for everybody. I imagine there's a lot of people who watch that show and think it's fucking awful and hate it. And I can see why, that I think they'd be falling on this side of the fence. Is like, I don't understand the motivation behind this character. And I think I totally get what you're coming from here too.
I get it from an obligation point of view. Son's killed, wants to kill his killer. Like, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that his son's killer is the worst of the bunch of this military group. So
yeah, helpful for the audience, isn't it?
Exactly. He's worse than than H. So that makes it a little bit better. One of the things I would say is though that why this bothered me more is because you're totally right as well. This thing of like entry points into story, that you can sometimes enter a film and a story can enter a point, and there doesn't have to be a full arc for a character because you're just coming in to witness a moment in their life, and that's fine, and sometimes it works. But I think one of the things that's kind of is interesting in this film is you do get the counter. You go into this the third part, and you get the story of the military unit.
Yeah,
and they all have this sort of. There's quite a few of them, but you generally get enough information about them to realize who they are. Like, there's like the big black guy who's like, I just want to be in the thick of it again. I miss being in, Afghanistan. Scott Kahn, bloody hell. Scott Eastwood's character is, he's got that burn or something. He's got like a scarring on the side of his face. He's clearly sort of, he's not right from the moment you meet him. There's another guy that's sort of trying to put it all together. And then there's Sarge, who's there, who's the group's leader. And he's got a family, and he's got a young kid or kids that are having a birthday party. And they're all known by the family. They are a unit. This is a family next to a family. Like, he's like his family, but this is still his military family, his brothers. And all that. So you get that motivation where they're like, they all have kind of different motivations, but generally it's about, get the money, get the thing. But they all trust each other implicitly. And there is this thing of like, they're trying to do this with as minimal casualties as possible. That's the intent originally.
Yeah.
So again, you have this counter with like, they almost get more character development than your protagonist. And that's what, that just feels a bit weird. I think that's why it stood out to me so much that I'm like, I kind of fully understand what's happening with this, with these robbers. That's gonna hit the whole Fortico depot. I get that more than Jason Statham's sort of like revenge sort of plot.
It'll be interesting to talk to you like latterly, like if you fancy, and you do ever into a Parker novel, because I think what you're saying is exactly that. Like, because Parker is such a insular character, you don't really, again, he's driven by what he's doing, but you don't really understand like where it's going to take him and who he's going to become by the end of the journey. And then when it cuts to, like in Payback, you get it's Greg Henry, another character actor I really like. Greg Henry, who's the guy who's like double crossed him. You get kind of 100 pages, 80 pages of this character, and you get to know them really, really well. So it's an interesting narrative trick, and I don't know if it always works because I guess your allegiances can be drawn elsewhere, can't they? I think they take great pains to make sure you don't like Jan. I mean,
Yes.
he's a complete dick, isn't he? And he's like
Yeah.
going against his unit, and he's buying stuff he shouldn't be buying, and he's very Wayne Grove from Heat. Um, you're not supposed to like him, but I hear you. Like, but I guess particularly Jeffrey Donovan's character, the Sarge Jackson, you're supposed to like because of his family background, and he's trying to keep the lid on Jan a little bit, isn't
Yeah.
he? But at the end of the day, they're still they're still armed robbers, aren't they? And they're
Yeah.
still putting lives at risk, and they're still so. I don't know. I like this section because I think it's interesting how it plays with your perception.
Mm.
But it is the section I'm least interested in. That I think because of what you said at the start, and I agree, we've got all these characters at Fortico, and then we meet the Stace crew, and now there's all these characters in this crew, and I really like some of the actors there. I really like the
Mm.
guy who plays Mike with the white hair and the white beard.
Yeah.
He's got good screen charisma. Um, and then we meet this next crew, and it's like, oh bloody hell, there's so many people to keep track of at this
Yes.
point now. This is the section where I'm starting to feel a little bit like, oh, now I've got another 6 people I've got to know and learn about,
And
and
because it's non-linear, you're kind of trying
yeah,
to pick out, okay, well, when does this thing now it's kind of there's more people. Okay, so
yeah.
when's that happening and stuff. So yes, it gets a little muddled in this section. I agree.
So I think, yeah, it for me, just personally, I think this feels like the weakest section for me because I
Mm.
kind of I get it, and again, I think similar to what we said before, with the flashback section we talked about previously, it feels a little bit cliche. The son has to get killed. Here, this feels a little bit cliche with the soldiers and not been treated right since they've come back, and you've got the one good guy who's a dad, and it's leaning into those kind of tropes that we know well. I'm not sure it's doing anything new with them.
No, no, it's not. This is not a revolutionary film. Like this is
Mm,
not treading new ground in any way, shape, or form.
mm.
Um, but it's doing a number of things well
Agreed. Yeah.
within the genre and tropes that we're used to seeing. But I agree with you that it's sort of there are moments when this sort of flashes not so much brilliance, but it flashes like really solid things fall in place, like the
Mhm,
banter and the acting and the sort of the editing, and you'll get a really good shot. There are moments when this film is incredibly strong.
mhm,
And then there are other moments when you do feel it's a little bit checklist.
mm.
Again, these contrivances and these sort of moments when you just go, okay, it's got to hit this moment, and so we're gonna get to it, and then we'll move through it, and
Yeah.
he's this character, and then but we've got to prove he's a dick by having him buy an expensive apartment and all this other stuff. So
Yeah.
we'll have that, move on, so on and so forth. Um,
It's just a little bit sit down around talky this section, and I think you were sort of feeling like, oh, we know where this is going. We want to get there, don't we? A little bit.
yeah.
But what I do totally buy is that they were a unit. I totally
Oh yeah.
believe they all knew each other. They've all worked together for years, and again, there's a naturalness to their conversations, their
Mm,
authenticity, to the pecking order they've got. I totally buy all of that. Really good
yeah.
performances from all of them in how they make that come across like they're not just 6 actors that have been cast. I really believe they were a unit.
No, I agree with that. I think, and it's clear that they all respect Sarge, and
Mm.
that they sort of listen. And like they've eaten a cake in at the birthday party, and they get told off by like the Sarge's wife, and they clearly have that sort of family respect and stuff. So I agree. I actually kind of like them as a unit,
Hmm.
and do think they work well.
Yeah. And then of course what we need to do is we need to kick on now, don't we? So we get the
Mm,
final title card. We get liver, lung, spleen, and heart, which is cool. I like it because again, it's like your brain kind of tells you where it's going, but it's not quite revealed yet. And then now we're into the end game, aren't we? Really, we're
yeah.
into Bullet revealing that he's the inside guy, telling Patrick they're going to use him in a very point break, like part of the heist
Mm,
way. I'm revealing to you this now, and because he gets some of his crew into the van, doesn't he? And they can only get onto site if the two Fortico employees kind of are seen on camera and like kind of give the nod, can't they?
yeah. Yeah. Again, this is not that I have a problem with it.
Mhm.
But again, we've talked about the fact that the film has set people up at the beginning of the film.
Mhm.
You know, as being, you know, it could have been Dave, it could have been John, it could have been the guy with the glasses. Like, there's all these people. Like, oh, who's the inside man? Like, who's got the leverage to be able to do this? And then when it comes to the reveal, it kind of goes off like a bit of a wet fart. 'Cause it's
Yeah,
just
I agree.
Bullet just sort of goes, "I'm the inside man," and you go, everyone goes, "Oh, okay, all right."
Yeah.
Well, there's no sort of like, "Oh my God," like that should feel like like, you know, a gut punch in some
Mm.
way.
Do you think H knew that's why? So do you think the film is trying to reflect the fact that he already knew, or he'd already worked out it was him?
No, I don't know, because I don't think this is the thing. I don't see H as like a detective.
Hmm.
Like, he's putting other information together. He's gathering information, but I don't think you know, this isn't a detective story. Like, he doesn't sort of, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's presented to him. It sort of lands in his lap. If they hadn't had intended to um, rob the Fortico depot on this day
Mm.
because of Black Monday, it's kind of funny. I think this film could have gone on indefinitely.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Because it's been 8 months from the incident
Yeah.
to this point now, so he's doing the due diligence, isn't he, to find out what's going
Mm.
on? Yeah.
So he's looking at them, but I don't think it's. I don't think. Yeah, I don't think he knew. He may have had his suspicions, but he
Hmm.
definitely. I don't think he knew. But again, because we're getting so little from Statham as his character, like, I don't
Mm.
feel like there's a or anything. He just sort of sits there, as you've said with you know the show you mentioned. Like, he just sort of sits there, and the camera rests on him, and he goes, "Are we okay?" And he's just like, "Yeah, yeah, all right, cool, all right. Well, I suppose we're fine with it then. Move on."
Yeah.
Um. So yeah, it's all, you know, it's because I think if he'd have figured it out and had all this stuff in place,
Hmm.
if you wanted him to be a detective, you know, like the Batman of all this, you'd have actually had a third or another layer
Mm.
where he's like, well, the likelihood is that they're going to rob Fortico on the day, on the Black Sunday, or Black Monday, because that's when there's the most cash, you know, 150 million in the depot. Da da da. And what you'd find out is he'd have gone along with it to get them in the depot, which is what I
Mm.
almost thought was going to happen.
Mm.
For him to then be like, aha, I've stored all this, you know, this artillery in a safe because I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's clearly not the case. So
No, it's all in the moment, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
What did you
um,
think scene? I mean, it's again, it feels kind of mannish. It's quite precise, I think. So we've
yeah,
got a massive shootout in the depot, haven't we?
yeah,
And they're
I
wearing like kind of dark trooper Star Wars body armor.
bulletproof, like
Yeah.
proper, like ballistic bulletproof. But when they get hit, they flinch, and it's like
Mm.
RoboCop kind of stuff. No, I think it's really good. I think actually that what I really liked, again, it's not breaking new ground, but I think it's presented well, is the way that the robbery itself is cut or interspersed with
Mm. Hmm.
Sarge and the other guy discussing it with the map.
Yeah.
So
Feels
they're
very Mission Impossible, that.
yeah, exactly. And I
Mm.
really like that, where it's sort of, you know, and they're explaining like, we know the cops are going to turn up, so that gives us 8 minutes before SWAT turn up. So we've got to be out by then. So they're giving you the timescales as you go,
Hmm.
and they're showing you. So because, and the reason I liked it, one of the things that sort of that bothers me sometimes in films like this is when you're not given clear understanding of the geography
Mm.
of a
Hmm.
place.
Hmm.
So they're robbing someone, and you're like, well, you've got to be here, and so-and-so's got to be there. And I'm going like, I don't know where those places are because you've not shown me. But this one gives you quite a clear map. Like, it literally gives you a plan. And they're like, well, the
Yeah.
car's going to pull in here. And I'm like, brilliant. I know exactly where
Yeah.
everyone's going to be and what's going on. So when I'm watching the action, it feels a lot clearer. So
And that's where that first act's really important, particularly that shot when we see him kind of do a tour of the whole. It's not quite a one-up, but he does a tour of kind of the depot. That becomes much more relatable now, doesn't it? Because of that. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. You've got this idea of this, especially the sort of you know, you've got some offices, but generally the initial depot where the
Mm.
vans will pull in, you have a relatively good
Hmm.
idea of how it all sort of lays out. So, no, I think it works really well. Um, and I think the shootout's good as well. It's
Mm.
grounded. It's, you know, despite the fact that they're bulletproof, um, it feels like grounded. It feels relatively realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no Stath foo, so it's
No.
which I actually appreciated at this point.
Yeah, that was going to be a question to you, like whether you think, like, you didn't feel like you wanted it, you needed it at this point, you were happy for this to be dialed back.
Yeah, I bought into this world. By this point,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, we're not getting that, and that's not this world.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with that. Like, if anything, if they'd have introduced it now, I think it'd have been really like, what the fuck? Like, that really
Yeah.
put me off.
Which is what happens at the end of the bank job, which is again is even more so than this, much more scaled back, and then suddenly he's a ninja at the end.
Yeah.
That was something we discussed when we reviewed that film. So I think I agree with you. I think it was the right move, the right call for this.
But more
this
so,
movie.
like, he has a fight with the guy. He has several sort of fights. And, he has to choke out the guy. There's a guy that's been guarding him. He shoots him in the leg, and when he goes down, like, he chokes him out. And it looks like it takes effort. Like, he's really pulling back on the head. And then when he sort of gets himself kitted up and he gets shot at and he gets hit, and then there's a fight in the hallway. I think he pulls his helmet off and it's been shot up and he's bleeding and he's limping, and I'm like, oh, this isn't like Superman. This isn't this isn't sort of this is Die Hard 1, not Die Hard 4. Let me put it that way.
Sure. Yeah. Nice. There's stakes and there's consequences. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone dies in this scene. Like, basically.
But by the end of it, everyone's dying, and it doesn't feel like, although he has kind of got plot armor, but he, in my head, I'm thinking he might not, because I've seen so many revenge films. I'm like, well, he could die. It feels like the stakes are high. Where I'm actually, like, he could get messed up in this. Like, it may not work out the way it's supposed to. So no, I like that he's not battling off. He's not doing Stath foo, and he's not sort of being bulletproof. It is taking a toll on him, and he gets battered. Like, he gets proper shot up. And it doesn't go right. But again, there is one thing. He has thought about the fact. He's considered the fact it's not going to go well. So he stashes his mobile phone in one of the money bags. And I was like, oh, cool. Okay. Good idea. Like, track your phone. So, yeah, even he thinks, like, this may not go right. I may not stop them here. I've got to have a way of tracking them. So, yeah, I like the fact it's being reactive and it's all sort of coming together. On the flip side, I do feel like...
How did I sense that was coming?
Yeah. I kind of feel like Scott Eastwood's character is almost the opposite, in a sense of, like, being bulletproof.
Yeah.
Where, like, everybody else is getting, like, proper shot up, and it all feels like it's good. Everyone's getting sort of like beat up. I think it's funny when Bullet kills Dave. Like, not funny in a fun, not a ha, but you've seen this. Like, Dave's always been a bit bravado and macho, and ends up just getting gunned down like an idiot because he trusts Bullet and stuff. So there's some hard hitting moments. All these people have died. Sarge has been shot in the neck, and there's blood spurting everywhere, and he's going to bleed out. But but Jan's not hit anywhere, and there's he's sort of just freewheeling about at the end, and I'm like, this feels wrong. This feels like he should have had like a hit in the arm or the leg or something. Sort of, he should have been winged in some way. And then for him to actually kill Sarge as well, again, I'm like, oh, this all feels a bit too much.
Yeah. Because he takes that bullet as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, look,
he crosses everyone.
Yeah, he kills Bullet. Now that's fine. I don't want him killing Bullet, but the fact he kills Sarge, the death of Sarge, naturally, like him, because he's bleeding out. Like, he didn't have a bloody chance anyway. Should have been like him dying. Should have been like, oh, there's no one to control him anymore. There's no one. Why the fuck should I care about Bullet? Like, Bullet's just he's somebody else's guy, not my guy. So I feel like Sarge should have died naturally, and that been the trigger that sort of like, oh, the money's all mine. I'm happy. Before he could have been like, well, I can't kill Bullet because, for everything that's going on, Sarge is still the boss, and I'll hold the line. But now he's gone, so I'll do what I want, kind of thing. I think that would have been.
Yeah. It's been brewing, hasn't it? I think that's why we get that scene earlier on when Sarge is like, stop acting like a punk kid, stop buying stuff and flashy necklaces and buying a bike. And you
Yeah.
could sort of see behind Jan's eyes, he's been planning this for a while. He's been planning taking over and removing Sarge for a while. So yeah, it's an interesting scene, isn't it? I don't think that moment is handled
No, I don't think this is
particularly
good.
well. Even if it just been like he took his hand off his neck.
Well, that would work so much better because
Yeah.
it's the there's a line in Batman Begins which I think again a little bit contrived but works well when he's got to kill Ra's al Ghul and he sort of says, "I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you either."
Mhm.
And I think that's a better way of looking at this, of going like, I'm not going to kill, I'm not proactively going to kill you, but I'm not going to help you live either. So
Yeah.
I'm going to let you bleed out. Would have been a better way, I think, for this because he slits his throat, and I'm like, that feels a bit excessive for someone's been shot in the neck. That kind of feel, it's like taking the top off a teapot and pouring it all out that way. It feels really sort of silly. So yeah, I don't know. It feels badly handled. That
Mhm.
point, it feels all that's where it feels clunky, and he feels a little cartoonish after that. He starts to feel a bit cartoonish as a villain. It's a bit like my money, like it's
Yeah, true. Sort of leaning into it makes me think of you referenced the Punisher earlier, like the Ben Barnes
Jigsaw.
character. Yeah,
Yeah,
Jigsaw in
Jigsaw.
season one of that show. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It starts to feel like that. It's his moving from Hans Gruber to the Sheriff of Nottingham. Like, you're going from a good villain to a pantomime villain kind of thing in short order.
Yeah.
And one other thing I wanted to check and this is because it's all been planned out well, very heat, as you say. Sort of, they go off. There's an underground passage that is no longer on the modern maps because it's not used, and they've got quad bikes sat there.
Mm.
Are there only two quad bikes there? Because only two people turn up, and it looks like there's only two. And I was like, that's surely there should be more of them.
Yeah, good point. I only saw the two. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm sure they even say in the, I mean, I guess, they changed their plans. There's a comment where they say, like, well, there'll be the two cars there, and then it's two quad bikes. And yeah, I don't know whether he was in charge of that part of the, but I
Maybe
mean,
that was his intention.
yeah, maybe. I think, again, this is where, like, sometimes, like, withholding information to certain points does or doesn't work. I think we then see, I think, right around Sarge's death, we see him talking to his like number one and talking about like, we know we're not all going to make it back from this, but we're going to do it anyway. So I think perhaps again that scene should have probably come a little bit earlier, perhaps, to give us that sense that they sort of knew.
Yeah, that not all 5, 6
Yeah.
of them are going to make it. Yeah. But it's all fine, and obviously he makes it back to his apartment, and it's all. And you're not entirely sure that Statham hasn't been killed
No.
at
Yeah.
this point.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
he got shot up and left on the floor, sort of bleeding out again. And this is where you get to the line, obviously the liver, spleen, lungs, and heart.
So
Because
that all the areas that his son was shot, wasn't it? Yeah. So he
yes,
then returns the favor to Jan. Yeah.
and I love that.
It's cool. Yeah.
That really works.
Mhm.
Because he's sat in the background, isn't he? Sort of again, he's tracked the phone. He calls the phone.
Yeah.
And you get he throws him the autopsy report and sort of makes him read it. And he's what the fuck is this? And it's like that's he flips the page and sees the picture of the kid and he realizes like everything sort of comes back to him.
Mhm.
And yeah, then he shoots him. And it's well done. I think it's really nice.
Mm.
What did you think about this though? I've said about obviously the motivations of the characters and that sort of thing. One of the things it's never said,
Mhm.
but Statham's character never takes any of the money from the apartment. So Jan's gone back with all the cash. He's got the 150 million, and as far as we know, Statham's character never takes any of that money and just hands it over to the FBI at the end of the film. So
That's where I was confused about whether Andy Garcia really was an FBI agent, or whether that's kind of a thing that he's posing, or whether he's a criminal mastermind as an FBI agent. At times, again, I read all the Alex Cross, James Patterson novels last year. He often does this sense of like those who rise to the top of the FBI are actually just as criminal or just as much of a psychopath as
Yeah,
those that they're.
absolute power corrupting absolutely kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I wasn't sure, because he seems to walk off to go into the
Yeah,
apartment, and my understanding was that he was probably going to walk out with all that money.
and also because it's Andy Garcia.
Well, yeah, quite. Yeah, yeah.
Because you're never entirely sure. Andy Garcia is one of those actors when you're like, oh, you could be a goodie or you could be a baddie.
Very true.
I've seen you do both, including most recently with Expendables 4.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know. The ending's ambiguous.
Mm.
One of the things that Julian and I talk about quite a bit on Stories That Time and Space, and we've said this about like Strange Days, and there's been a couple of other films we've said it is like we just wish the film would roll on a little bit more. There's that sort of okay, we want the epilogue. Well, I want that little bit of and this is sometimes I think a fault of my own. I'm fine with ambiguous endings, but I also I want to see I'd want to see that just something the next day with him telling his wife, like, I got him, or if he is just back to normal, and on the television you see Andy Garcia being celebrated as super FBI agent, brings down, armored car gang or whatever.
Yeah.
Just something that's sort of so they have reset the normal, like he has gone back to whatever. And he is a psychopath or a sociopath, and he cared for his family, but like beyond that, like he's back to being a criminal. I don't know. I think I would have liked that, but it doesn't really dent the film for not having it.
No, it's interesting. It's a hard call, isn't it? There's so many moments probably you can think off the top of your head, and I can, where actually there's the opposite. Oh, I just wish you'd ended like 10 seconds before X4. And then there's often the end of the Bourne Ultimatum is one that always jumps into my head. We leave Jason Bourne floating in the water, just like we met him in the Bourne Identity. Please cut. I just want my own version where we don't have that news report in a cafe later where it's like the body was never found. Well, we fucking know that. I don't need it in my face. Like, cut on the floating in the water. So yeah, it's interesting. I think. Yeah, I think actually this wouldn't have done any harm, having like a little scene afterwards. Even like again, if you got in the car, or yeah, and if he picked up the phone in the car and called somebody, or yeah, I don't know. I hear you. Like it might have then made up for all the other things that you have felt before. If this had that little wrap up, it might have kind of helped to nullify some of that a little bit, or to mute some of that a little bit.
Yeah, because the thing that hangs over my head of this film, is the character is his sort of his emotional motivation and his emotional journey on this. Because the other thing we should highlight as well, we haven't really we talked about the shootout, and the shootout is good. I think the shootout is done really well. As you said, everybody dies.
Yeah.
Everybody dies pretty much.
Yeah, all of the military guys, all of the people that work for Fortico.
Yeah,
it's literally just Jan and the Stath, isn't it? And H, you get out. Yeah.
It's a bit of a bloodbath, and most of those clearly had families and people that cared about them and all this other thing. So there's an element of you going like, yeah, your hunt for it is this thing of saying your hunt for revenge has actually caused more damage than the original event. But we're not here to sort of assess that.
I wonder if they changed this. We have the scene with the wife during the flashback where she's like, "You're a cold man. I don't know. I never know how you feel." And I wonder if that scene had been changed slightly to even just be like, "You've got to do this for our boy."
Yeah.
And then at the end here, he picks up the phone and he calls her and says, like, "I've done it.
It's done." Yeah.
I wonder if that again that just would have given you a bit more of a frame, just would have given you a bit more something to hang his motivation off of. Yeah. Not motivation, because we understand the motivation, but give you a bit more. He's not even really developing the character. I don't know. Just even that might have given you like a little bit more of understanding of the end point, what his end goal is, what his final game is. Yeah.
Yeah. Because often the loss of a family in a revenge film is clearing the chessboard or clearing the board to allow the person taking revenge to die in order to rejoin their family. That's sort of kind of the usual, the trope of the end game. or it's a real descent. I mean, I did it with Spider-Dan, not long ago. We did
Yeah, the revenge
revenge
movies.
films,
Yeah.
and we talked about one in particular I often think about is Avengement, the Scott Adkins. And the whole point of that film is like the film starts with him being kind of clean cut and everything, and how that his time in prison having been sort of like betrayed by whoever, and the fact he becomes like harder and meaner, and collects like scars and like this weird grill teeth, and it all builds up to this thing of like eventually the revenge he takes is like, no, this is like this is going to have to end only one way because there's no living sort of beyond this act of vengeance. I don't know. Yeah, I never feel that with this film where I'm like, it kind of just feels like he spent an awful lot of time doing this, almost a year in
Yeah.
all this, not just because before he joined Fortico, he went on he was tracking people down, he was killing people and torturing people for information. So this is almost a year later when he finally sort of gets this final point. But I don't know. It just feels. I just feel kind of like adrift at thinking of like, oh, you've done all this stuff, but I don't really care if you. I don't even know if you give a shit about any of it at all. Even like a drop line from one of his henchmen that are like, he's lost. Like, I've seen him, but I've seen him reach the edge before, and this is worse, kind of thing, or something.
Yeah, we get that one nice conversation, don't we? With is it Mike with the guy who's saying like I like the actor, where he says like, look,
You got to
this is
drop
it.
it.
Yeah, this is enough now. Like,
Yeah.
and that's when you mentioned like he says, "I will go back to London," but he doesn't. He goes undercover at Fortescue, but he's kind of like, we are now. We're past the point of no return. Like people are going to start coming back on us now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, no, that's the film. But
how do you feel it compares to the other three we've done? Because I mean, War doesn't quite fit into this category because it's Ryan Felipe, isn't it, in that one, and it's
not very good.
but Blitz and Safe definitely fits this. We've almost had like a little trilogy of Stath one man on the warpath missions. Where do you think
with
it kind of
corruption and
fits?
stuff? I think they almost fit in that order. I do think this is, of the three of them, I think I enjoyed Safe because it's a Jason Statham film.
Yeah.
And it has got some really good fight scenes in it. The one in the restaurant and some of the bits in the hotel and stuff like that. So, and I kind of like it. It has a little bit of a messy ending, but I like some. And there's one on the train as well. Isn't there? There's some fight scenes and stuff. So that's got some really good fight scenes in that I'm expecting of Statham. They do act as a trilogy, but they're kind of just different. But I think I like that because of that. But I do think this is a more accomplished film. It's going for something. And all right, I'm kind of struggling with maybe with H's emotional motivations, but the structuring of the film and the reveals and the sort of non-linear narrative all works for the most part. There's clunky moments, but it works. I think it works really well, and it's all satisfying and logistically and I think it all works. A couple of there's character things I wish had paid out more between people. Blitz is very straightforward, and I think we said it at the time, and having watched films like Safe and this in particular, there is that thing where even more I'm like, I want a follow-up.
Right, yeah, it came a little bit too early on in his career.
Yeah, I think he would do that character better now than he did then. And I think, there'd be an assuredness and a sort of like he could be that character that would almost be like the 21st century Dirty Harry that I think would work better. I could see, give it to Guy Ritchie.
Yeah,
and have Guy Ritchie and Jason Statham do a Blitz follow-up with that character. What was he called? I forgot what the character's called, but it was
because Blitz was the guy he was going after, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's like Brandt.
Oh yeah, well done. Yeah, good memory. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I just feel like there's more that could be done with that character, and I'd like to see Statham sort of go, come back and be like, we're going to do a low budget, gritty follow up with this character of Brandt. And again, stick it on this. It doesn't have to be all the fighting. You don't have to have much, staff foo. You can do sort of like a bit of it, but like, keep it like a gritty, sort of police procedural. But I think I'd want to see that more now after seeing films like this.
Yeah, which kind of answers the last question I was going to ask you. Really was like where we feel he has that in his performance. I think we've said it all the way through. Really, isn't it? Like he owns his character. Like whether
Yeah.
I know that you've had your issues with what they chose to do with the character, but he actually realizes it all
Oh,
perfectly.
brilliantly.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's that thing. I think with Statham, he's a Statham is a sort of like a one-note actor in
Hmm.
many ways that has found a way of making that work.
Yeah.
And I think he knows exactly the films he should make. And I think, with the right director, like Guy Ritchie, I think that can work incredibly well. But again, I think this comes to, I know you've covered some of them. Or have you reached Spy? You have, haven't you? You've done
Yeah.
Spy and stuff.
Yeah.
I think by doing those films as well, Spy and a couple of other films where he's sort of taken the mickey out of himself a little bit, or he's done the comedy, I think it's made him more assured in doing the tough man roles. Like there's the more stoic characters, because he's like, I'm not just doing that. I can now do it almost as a parody, and I can do it seriously, and I can pull them both off.
Yeah. And that's where Operation Fortune's interesting because that can't quite decide whether it wants to be leaning into the silliness and the kind of Guy Ritchie-ness and the spyness, or whether it wants to be he's kind of the more serious guy in the silly movie. So I'm not, that actually comes next. I'm not sure that my memory of watching it when it first came out, it doesn't quite work as well as this because it doesn't quite pitch its tone quite right.
Yeah, but I think this film, what's his character in the Fast and the Furious called?
Deckard Shaw.
Deckard Shaw is another like catharsis film. Like he can do all the sort of the staff foo, he can do all the big quips, and he can do all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And it's almost like, again, I feel those films have reached parody level.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he's almost doing like a parody of the action star. And he's like, yeah, I'm on a ball. I can do all that stuff over here. So which means I can then do this with Ritchie. So I'm good. So yeah, you're right. I'm not keen on everything they've done with the character, but they made a choice and they stick to it, and he goes for it. So I can't fault them for that.
Yeah, cool. All right, letterboxed, and then how you feel overall? Okay, Nick Atkinson says, hoping for a fun Statham flick, but this was so boring. I hated every character apart from Statham. They spend the entire film in a dick measuring contest and are clearly all just there to be pawns in the final fight. And even that final fight was really disappointing. None of the kills felt satisfying, which sucks for a revenge story.
Okay.
Just kind of, interesting because he's sort of in the same realm as us, but much more critical about everything. Lou Shoemaker. This is almost unrecognizable as a Guy Ritchie movie, which, thank God. I was worried that the trailers were hiding Ritchie's trademark zaniness, but the movie is deadly serious, which mostly works in its favour. The best part of the movie is the first act, which follows Statham as the mysterious H as he integrates himself among his co-workers at an armoured car company. The action takes a while to kick off, but it absolutely delivers when it arrives. There are really just two things holding this back from being one of my favourite action movies of the 21st century. One is the absolutely atrocious dialogue. The first scene, which follows the two unnamed guards picking up a load of money, sounds like it was pulled directly out of the opening scene of a random Law and Order episode, where someone finds a dead body. In addition to the general badness of the dialogue, it's also peppered with a lot of homophobic insults, particularly in the first half of the movie. Not so much anti-gay stuff, as like e.g. people referring to Statham as a woman to emasculate him. Just sucks. The other big problem is the montage in the middle of the movie, where we get Statham's backstory. It's boring. It introduces a ton of characters who wind up never coming back. It's incredibly confusing, and worst of all, it makes Statham look like an unrepentant psychopath. During multiple scenes of him torturing people for information, I wanted to ask Ritchie, we're supposed to like this guy, right?
Yeah.
And he sort of falls right in the middle, and is it's a 3.5-star review.
That's yeah.
Mm.
It's interesting. I'm sort of thinking about these sort of people. They're picking up similar things, so
Yeah.
we're not we're not far off. We're not picking up random stuff. But it's interesting how different people are sort of how they are affected or pick up on the pits. Because I can see what they're saying about sort of like the relatively homophobic sort of banter, but I'm like, yeah, but it's not in a kind of, it's weirdly not in a derogatory way. It's kind of sort of in a locker room banterish way of emasculation rather than
Yeah.
derogatory kind of way. But yeah, it's a film at time as well in a way, isn't it? Like you say, I could imagine this being made in the 70s with Charles Bronson or
Mm.
Clint Eastwood or someone like that. So yeah, I think it's that's definitely the Guy Ritchie era that he wants to emulate.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, one more. Dawson Joyce. Easily Guy Ritchie's meanest film to date, and arguably even his finest work yet. Wrath of Man is a terrific blend of fun heist action, relentlessly grim crime drama, oppressively nihilistic revenge thriller, and haunting social commentary that's not only home to a career best performance from a terrifying Jason Statham, but also a fascinating showcase for Ritchie's artistic evolution.
That's a bit wankery, isn't it? I mean, it's a haunting social commentary.
Yeah, I actually agree with most of that. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what the social commentary is, however.
No.
Do kill people in revenge because you'll win in the end?
Gangs, multiple gangs robbing. Is it the robbing the rich to feed the poor? I don't know. Yeah.
No. But I sort of agree. I feel like we said it in our own way. That it's kind of feels like the most assured movie they've made
Oh,
together.
100%.
Was
I agree with that.
mature, and
Yes.
there's definite control in the performance and the direction. So yeah,
All that I agree with. Yeah, I feel that's true. It's true. It's a confident and assured performance in film, definitely. Yeah, so that's definitely true. But yeah, whenever I see things like that in people sort of come, I've done it. I'll admit it. I've put those sort of things in a review, and sometimes you go back and you've been like, oh God, I'm a wanker. That's just the kind of,
Absolutely.
I'm trying to be too clever for my own good there. But
yeah, I mean, I've still got quite a lot of the old newspaper clippings of my mid to late 20s era of doing film reviews, and I delve in every night when I've realised, like, I've watched a film that I haven't seen for 15, 20 years, and I think, oh, I'll go and see what I said back in the day. Oh, it's hard reading every time I do.
yes, yeah, there's no better critic of the person you are in your 20s and the person you are when you're older in life.
That's very true.
Yeah.
What do you think then? So, do you think this is as low down as Completist Only? Do you think it's hitting that middle ground as worth catching, or does it manage to hit classic status for you in terms of the Stath filmography?
It's riding the line between worth catching and classic. It's definitely worth catching. I think there's a lot in here that's worth seeing. I think it really works. It's better than having. It's not the kind of it's better than a film you would have on in the background.
Yep.
That it demands that you engage with it, and I think that's a good thing. Is it a classic? I kind of think it edges into it because of its assuredness. And even for some of the choices that I dislike, I think I'm glad that it makes them.
At least it commits as such.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think when it gets to the violence and when it culminates in the shootout in the depot and stuff, I think it's really well done. And I think that whole finale, that whole sort of final section is absolutely Guy Ritchie should be applauded for that. I think it's done incredibly well. You know where people are, you know how it's all put together, you're able to follow who's who visually and sort of everything's going on. So no, I think it sort of eggs into classic for Statham. I think it's definitely up there, yeah.
Nice. Thanks. Yeah. Like I said, I think it said quite near the top, it fits into a really comfortable triple bill with Heat and The Town for me. And that's high praise. Obviously, Heat is the pinnacle.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll ever be reached again. But I do think The Town is as close as you can probably get. I think that's a really fantastic movie, and I put this at Town level, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think Town is one of those. I don't know why it's kind of been forgotten, hasn't it? It's a really good film that's sort of oddly been forgotten. I don't know why. Great cast, good
like
film.
Gone Baby Gone came out, didn't it? Everyone was like, "Whoa, actually, Ben Affleck can really direct as well," and that is another great movie. And then The Town just sort of it just sort of came and went quietly, and then Argo came after that, of course. So I think he's got kind of Argo, the Oscar winner, and Gone Baby Gone, like, whoa, that's the guy that's in Armageddon.
Yeah.
On each side, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, I don't know. If anything, I actually think I'll throw this out there. Hot, topic. I think The Town is better than Gone Baby Gone.
I agree. Yeah.
As a film, Argo is very good, but yeah, no, I agree. I think The Town, I'd throw that out there definitely with it. I did work if you were to hold this up as a double bill, and or and there's a few of the like revenge flicks I could imagine sort of putting this up against as well. So yeah, I think this is one of those ones that I think if you are, when you come to the end of Statham's current filmography, and you look back, I can imagine this standing out and going like, yeah, that's a bit of a milestone or a high point within his career.
Yeah. I think I've only got 5 to go, so we're not far off. And I think at this stage, it's going to be up towards the top for me, definitely. Yeah. Brilliant, mate. So, is there anything you'd like to promote before you go? This is going to be out on the 27th of this month of May. What have you got coming up?
So what have we got coming up? Well, in that case, by the end of May, we'll have finished our on Stories Out of Time and Space. We'll have finished Black Mirror. We'll have worked our way through that, and you'll know my full opinion of that and how we will never be going back to do any of the feature seasons. But we will have entered our post-apocalyptic season, which is what we're doing, and we will have kicked off with Mad Max, and we're going to have a Mad Max week. We're going to go from Mad Max all the way through to Furiosa. Wow, cool. 5 films, 5 days. You're going to get a week of Mad Max before we fully enter, and then we enter some 1950s post-apocalypse films that smaller films. So, yep. A lot of good stuff coming up. So that Stories Out of Time and Space. So catch that. Go check that out. Some really good films. 20th Century Geek. We've got episode 200 coming up soon.
Great.
Tony and I have finished our initial season of the story time. So with that, we sort of finished that. So we're looking at doing another one for the summer. Hudson Hawk is going to be our summer blockbuster. You and I are talking about doing another mini retrospective after we've had our Jackie Chan police story. We're going to continue with the police theme, and we're going to get ready for Beverly Hills Cop 4 coming on Netflix. So we're going to do the Beverly Hills Cop series as well. So yeah, loads of good stuff coming up. And Julian says we're going to Julian and I are going to do G.I. Joe as well.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
So we're going to go from the cartoon all the way through to Snake Eyes. So we're going to do a bit of a G.I. Joe retrospective as well. So got lots of fun things coming up actually. So it's all coming up soon. So yeah, go check it out at 20th Century Geek on all the social medias, or at Pod Time Space for Stories at Time and Space. Go check them out.
Fantastic. Thank you, mate.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you, everyone else, for listening and partaking in this journey with me through the Stath's filmography. That was Wrath of Man. Next up in a fortnight, Tony Farina returns to the show to discuss the Stath's second Ritchie collaboration in a row for Operation Fortune, Ruse de Guerre, which will be followed by his final, for now, appearance in the Fast franchise, as Chris and Dave bring their X-rated commentary back to dissect the 10th mainline Furious franchise entry for anyone that is watching along. I'm Jack's Musings, that's JACS, and you can find me on X where I'm most active. You can also contact the show directly on X or Instagram under the name Back to the Filmog. Make sure you use the hashtag #FollowTheFilmography. I'm also a proud member of the Comics Emotion family, a super place full of the world's greatest people, dedicated to bringing you podcasts on a variety of geeky topics. So, please make sure you take the time to search, subscribe, and rate our shows whenever and wherever you listen. Until next time, be excellent to each other, and make sure you take the time to treat yourself too. I am Jack signing off. Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers! cut.